I am excited about joining a colleague here today who joins us regularly on Wednesdays. He also was part of that radio station. He's a brilliant scholar, Middle Eastern scholar, and presidential historian. He's John Rothman, everybody. Hi, John.
Hi, Mark. Happy to be with you.
So first, because we were talking about the gerrymandering, and then I want to get to the war in Iran, the Virginia vote that showed up and now seems to clearly favor a redistricting plan for Democrats. Can you speak to that quickly?
Yeah, it was a narrow vote, but nonetheless, this is Donald Trump's situation. He got Texas to decide to redistrict in order to have more Republicans from Texas. California, by the way, then put a measure on the ballot, Proposition 50, authored by Gavin Newsom, which passed with 60%, 61% of the vote, and California is redistricting. And so what you're seeing is this battle of redistricting in order to assure who will be in the majority in the House of Representatives come next January. My own sense at this moment is no matter what redistricting there is, no matter what they do, the Republicans are going to lose. Because in the end, no matter how you carve districts, in the end, what happens is people, if they don't like something, vote for it or against it. And so I think the Republicans are in for a real drubbing come November.
Well, I would just respectfully disagree with you, because if you gerrymander enough, you can pretty much make yourself a lead pipe cinch to retain power. That's just a fact.
Yeah, I don't care. It's not
I don't care how disenchanted the populace is. Now, obviously, if you turn off everybody, then that's different. But I'm just saying those. You know how creatively they gerrymander, John, and they can maintain power through a lot of pretty stiff political headwinds.
And they're trying. They're trying. But look what happened in Virginia. Look what happened here in California.
Well, Virginia is a squishier state. I mean, look at some, But your point's well taken that they're not entering into a midterm where they're very popular. But all I'm trying to say is gerrymandering and where districts are drawn is crucially important, I guess is what I'm saying.
May I just offer one observation? I worked for many years for Senator Milton Marks, a California state senator. He created the nonpartisan committee that redrew district lines here in California. I want you to know it was effective, fair. Democrats and Republicans signed off on. The only reason that Gavin Newsom put this measure on the ballot, Prop 50, is because of the unfairness of what happened in Texas and theoretically in Florida. So, this is part of the American political game. It's too bad. But I think the Republicans are going to lose in November, in part their own hubris. And none of this would have been going on had not Donald Trump suggested to Texas change your procedures and redistrict in the middle of a term.
Yeah, that's clearly true. Now to Iran. Donald Trump unilaterally saying that he is extending the ceasefire with Iran at the request of Pakistan. And he's saying that he's awaiting a unified proposal from Tehran. But the U.S. is also maintaining its blockade of Iranian ports.
Yeah.
He says, and he's claimed this stuff in various social media posts, that Trump is saying that Iran is collapsing financially and, the economy. I think this is having a dramatic effect on Iran. They're losing $500 million, is what he's saying, every day. And as long as the Strait of Hormuz is effectively closed, they will continue to lose at that rate. I wonder if you could speak to this, because the reality is that there was to have been a negotiation, and now negotiators aren't even leaving Washington. Isn't that right?
Well, not really. And I'll explain why I think that. Donald Trump announced there would be negotiations, but if you listen to the Iranians, they said, no, we're not prepared to negotiate. Not only that, the Iranians have said clearly they are not going to turn over their nuclear materials. They have also said that the Strait of Hormuz is their possession. They are going to continue to run it. And all of Donald Trump's protestations to the contrary have done no good. Clearly, the Iranians have the upper hand. Now, let's point out that we have 3 battleships there. We have the Gerald Ford, the Abraham Lincoln, and the George H.W. Bush. And let's point out that we have at least 50, maybe more, 50,000 American military personnel. How long can that be sustained financially without some break one way or the other? So Donald Trump is under a lot of pressure now. And remember, we've got the midterm elections coming up. Prices for gasoline are going up. Prices at the grocery store are going up. And Republicans are starting to say to him, hey, you promised us you weren't going to do this, that there would not be these kind of wars. One other quick comment while you're at it. Lebanon, and I want to be very clear, Israel and Lebanon have had a ceasefire for years, but it's not Lebanon that concerns us. It's Hezbollah, the army of God. They operate as a separate entity inside of Lebanon, and frankly, it's a real conundrum. The Israelis will not allow rockets to be fired from Lebanon into Israel, and so there's a variety of issues involved. And if I may, one other quick comment. You know me, I go on and on. NATO, the NATO people, Donald Trump is continuing to diss NATO. It's a huge mistake, and it is going to have real consequences for America and for Europe when this war is over.
Well, a quick word about that. I mean, NATO is already making plans that don't include the U.S. That's just what's happening. I mean, the NATO alliance is effectively diminished now to the point that they are making plans, and they're openly meeting without the U.S. And so what would have been smart is for Trump to have built some coalition of NATO countries or others that would have, I mean, a la Iraq, I mean, which is a horrible, ridiculous war. I called it out at the time. I'm sure you did as well. I hated the idea of going into Iraq. The one thing that Bush did was he kind of lawyered up. He went to the UN twice with Powell. He had concocted information and concocted a threat and essentially got a coalition of nations to go in and pursue this ridiculous military exercise, which ended up costing so much money, so many lives, and
just like this one.
And
this is going to
so cut to Trump, who did none of those things. He just actually was beginning a negotiation during which almost he opened fire. It was the next day that he opened fire on the negotiators. So Trump, without any coalition of any countries, he didn't come to the American people and make a case. He's begun this. So the idea that he could double back and get NATO involved, I think is it's a fool's errand, although I will say this. The international community, and then I want to play this, and I think you'll agree with me on this, they want that Strait of Hormuz open, and they don't want tolls being levied and having that strait controlled by any country, Iran, the Omanis, either way. And so I do believe the international community will rally in some way if this thing goes on long enough. Don't you agree?
Well, I'll tell you the problem. The problem is the United Nations is completely impotent. And if you're going to use the United Nations as the vehicle, it's a big problem. I agree with your basic premise. The idea of restoring the status quo ante before this conflict began, where the Strait of Hormuz was open to all, is something that is critical. Please note that Donald Trump has completely misstated, stating, first of all, that maybe he'd go into business with the Iranians with a toll we could do together. Nonsense. Talking about how the United States will control the Strait of Hormuz. Nonsense. Announcing on more than one occasion that the strait is open. Patently nonsense. So you have an administration that is completely out of the realm of reality when it comes to the Middle East. And that, my friends, is a real problem. May I just add?
No, I want to run, thank you.
Go
you
ahead.
can add in a second, but I want to run just a little bit of the news breaking that Iran has now fired on 3 ships in the strait and even detained 2 of them. Go ahead, Tony, please. Cut 17.
Errol, we've got a very serious situation developing in the Strait of Hormuz. We understand at least 2 vessels, possibly a third, have essentially been impounded, taken by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, and are being sailed currently into Iranian waters. Now, these, what we understand, are cargo vessels. Now, this, of course, follows U.S. forces seizing an Iranian-linked vessel as it tried to pass through the strait into the Indian Ocean, where the U.S. has its own blockade at the very end of the Strait of Hormuz, also opening fire on that vessel. And all of just underscores the real tension between both the U.S. and Iran ahead of these talks, which were supposed to be held here in Islamabad. But we still haven't seen those talks materialize, with the president saying that there is a ceasefire in place, but not saying how long that ceasefire is going to be. And very quickly, Errol, I should just add, we were in the Strait of Hormuz just a few days ago. We could see vessel after vessel, tanker after tanker just sitting there. And it really just betrayed this calm that we were there. And now we're seeing these tensions really ramp up at a time when both sides should be talking. Yeah.
Now, John, your thoughts, because this is Iran trying to take the upper hand as well, even as the blockade continues. Yeah.
Iran has the upper hand. There's nothing we can do. And the fact that Donald Trump keeps saying we will control the Strait of Hormuz is pure rubbish. It's nonsense. The Iranians won't allow that to happen. So we have that problem. I should also indicate that the real victim in all of this politically is J.D. Vance, who has been sent for these negotiations. While he was there in Islamabad originally, he had to call Donald Trump for everything he wanted to do. And in the end, of course, we didn't know whether he was coming or going. And frankly, he doesn't know if he's coming or going. The ineffectiveness of this administration in terms of its foreign policy, building alliances, dealing with a crisis in the Middle East is astounding. And everybody should know that it shows the incompetence of this administration. And I say it sadly because, frankly, to see the United States in this position is not good for anybody.
Couldn't agree more. I want you just to hear a little bit of Robert Pape. He's a professor in Chicago who does a Substack, very popular, and talks about the escalation ladder and talks about the ways in which messaging and the various forces at play here all do play out militarily. He's been sort of eerily accurate. Play me cut 2, if you would, please, Tony, from Pape, and this is a little bit of his take on it when it comes to information.
Just trying to get helping a journalist because they all want stories and stuff, and I'm just trying to tell them that a good way to parse this, because I do national surveys of the U.S., but this is a part of me your listeners don't know, is that think of the public as 60, 30, 10. 60, 30, 10. 60% are the disengaged. They're the ones who maybe they're following this once every 5 minutes, every few days. And so when Trump says going to get the big, beautiful bill and all that works for that group. 60% of the public's not small change. Then you have 30% that are following it probably on a daily basis, maybe a half hour a day. And for them, it still works pretty well what Trump is doing. Then you have the 10%. And that 10% is also the Iranian leadership. That's what that post was. We're extending the ceasefire. He was talking not to the 60 or the 30 or even the 10% in America. He's targeting directly those Iranian leaders. And then what did the Iranian leaders do when they got his post? They seized those tankers. So they said, but they didn't even bother. They didn't even bother responding to his post. They just did it.
It is true, John, that Trump is trying to shape a reality, and he just cannot in the case of this conflict.
If you keep repeating a falsehood often enough, he believes you can make it true. For instance, he won the election of 2020. Just keep repeating it. Have your aides who testify before Congress obfuscate on who won the election. Just keep pursuing that line. The same thing applies in the Middle East. That's why when he talks about the Strait of Hormuz being open, and we can see with our own eyes that it isn't, the question then becomes, at what point do you lose confidence in the honesty and integrity of your leader?
The other thing that I thought was interesting from Pape was his notion, and this seems clear just in the way that the Iranians have trolled the Americans. I mean, some of the stuff that they've done with AI, and it's just super clever and even funny. I mean, they really understand the psyche of America more than even Trump does. Play me cut 1. This is the Iranians really reading us in a stronger way than the Americans are able to read them.
You're seeing that the Iranians are reading us better than we're reading Iran. And partly that's because we keep having this myth that yes, we bombed their leadership, therefore they must be fractured. Well, I just posted on X. If the Iranian leadership is fractured, it's between those who want to play hardball and those who want to play more hardball. Hardball versus more hardball, because we killed all the doves. we literally, when we targeted, we killed 80% of the leaders we killed were the most dovish of the group of leaders that lived in Iran, that were in Iran. And so it's not like we had this target set of leaders and we targeted 80, 90% of the hawks. What we did is we targeted, and apparently the ones we could find were the ones who were the doves who didn't think they were going to get killed because they didn't hide their tracks. So we did target and kill them. But what that's done is it's put the hawks even more in charge. You see what I mean? And that's what you see. So we keep saying they're fractured, they disagree, they do all this. Yeah, it's between hardball and more hardball.
Yeah, it's true, John. All of the moderates are out of the game now. And the IRGC, these guys have no interest in making some deal with America.
Exactly right. And let's point out, Donald Trump keeps saying that the Iranian leadership was changed. It is exactly the opposite. Their leadership has become more entrenched, more hardline. And you and I understand it. The American people, we are going to learn that lesson as this crisis continues.
The last thing just on this, and then I want to ask you about a couple of things that have broken domestically that I think are really important. But just on Iran, play me cut 6 on the underestimating of Iran that has clearly informed this entire thing.
We underestimated their capabilities, as David just illustrated there.
Rear Admiral James
I would also add
McPherson.
that their acts in attacking non-belligerent ships in an international strait is against the law, against the international law. And international straits like the Straits of Hormuz, there are many of those around the world, such as the Strait of Gibraltar, the Straits of Dover, where water between two countries includes their territorial seas. And the rule under international law is non-belligerent vessels are supposed to be allowed transit passage that is unimpeded either on the water or overflight in those transit of those straits. And Iran is clearly violating that international law.
Yeah, I mean, Iran is violating it, and the Americans are in the verge of violation as well. I mean, the international law card seems like a tough one to play because both parties now to all of this seem very much in violation. Finally,
wait,
and this
go back in history to the Straits of Tiran, and you will note that the Six-Day War began because Egypt shut the Straits of Tiran, and the Israelis came to the Europeans and the Americans and said, "Send in an armada, open it up." We weren't prepared to do it, and that's why the Israelis struck in June of 1967, which resulted in the Six-Day War.
Such a good point. These critical waterways, they become then flashpoints, and we've seen it through time. And finally, there is an economic effect that we're all going to feel. Europe is feeling it, and there were, I think I saw 20,000, was that the number, Kim, of Lufthansa flights canceled in the next year, already anticipating the shortage of jet fuel. But here's what's happened just in the last 24 hours. This is from Al Jazeera, a report on a detained containers. They had to be offloaded in Pakistan. Go ahead, Tony. It's cut 8.
3,000 containers of goods destined for Iran have ended up stranded in Pakistan as a direct result of the U.S. naval blockade. Osama bin Javed is live for us in the Pakistani capital, Islamabad. Osama, just talk us through, if you could, the situation with this cargo that's become stuck in Pakistan.
Well, Mohammed, we've been investigating on the impact of this naval blockade and the situation in the Strait of Hormuz in the last few days. What we've been shown are documents from the Iranian Chamber of Commerce seeking help to get these 3,000 containers which have been stranded in Karachi's ports as transshipment. They were destined for Iran. They couldn't go there, so they were offloaded in Karachi. Now, we suspect that there's going to be a land route that is being discussed with Pakistani authorities where these containers would be taken overland by Pakistani trucks to the border, and from the border, they'll be taken by Iranian trucks and lorries. But what we have been able to ascertain is that Iran has established a toll booth on the Strait of Hormuz, which is it is charging in yuan accounts with China, and also in cryptocurrency, as maritime experts and shipping industry has told us. And there's a tier system in that. It is charging about $1 per barrel of oil. So a ship carrying millions of barrels of oil would give millions of dollars to the Iranians. And vice versa, if there is a ship that is carrying cargo, that money would be determined on the value of oil barrels. So it appears that this is something that was working for Iran, but now the Americans have found essentially how to choke that supply.
There you have what is another ripple effect economically. And John, I think the repercussions are going to be so much bigger than Trump had anticipated. He thought it was one and done, Venezuela Part 2, and it is anything but. And everyone knew that except Trump, who completely bought the BS PowerPoint presentation presented by the Israelis.
Or by his own staff. And I want to emphasize that a lot of this came internally from people in the White House who supported this particular action. Let me tell you when we're really...
Well, the Saudis in the form of Kushner, if that's what you mean, because Kushner is essentially a functionary of the Saudis.
Witkoff,
and the UAE even was right. Involved. They wanted it also.
Yeah, but, so I think it's very important people understand this had something to do with Israel because Israel and the United States were aligned. But our allies, our Arab allies who oppose the Iranians, have been enthusiastic about this.
I think that's an important point. John is making an important point, but I have to say this, John. It's not that the Israelis had something to do with it. The Israelis led the charge. And then I'd say the Saudis and the Emiratis, they had something to do with it as well.
With all due respect, we will disagree. Right. The Israelis did not lead the charge. That may be a myth put forth by several people.
You read the New York Times reporting, though, right? On the fact that Mossad and Netanyahu came. They met in the Situation Room at the White House. Witkoff was there. Kushner was there, and you got the Joint Chiefs. Kane was there, and I mean,
I don't disagree with the analysis.
So that was the pitch, though, wasn't it, John? That was from the Israelis.
No, the Israeli pitch was this was a necessary action, but the implications of the action, the Israelis never believed, and I know this firsthand, that the Strait of Hormuz would not be put in this position. There are implications. May I just point out, anybody listening to the sound of our voice who uses pharmaceuticals, particularly blood pressure medications, all of that will be profoundly affected in what is happening now. So the financial ramifications are going to be vast. And that to me is also critical. But let me point out, as you properly did, that our allies, that is the Kuwaitis, the Omanis, the others, were very anxious for this policy to be concluded and that the Iranians be defanged, if you will. So I don't want to get into too much technicality with you, but again, it's a conflict between Shia and Sunni.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm just trying to say is that the pitch was a regular pitch, John, you know that, to past presidents as well. And we even had the Biden official on who was, this is just a couple of days ago, who was saying, yeah, we were considering it too. So to be fair, it was considered at the time of the Biden administration that we might have to do something with Iran. So it was viewed as a contemporary issue. But the only guy who took the bait, I mean, really hook, line, and sinker was Trump.
That's correct. But remember that the nuclear threat was and remains a real threat. And that was the linchpin of this whole operation, if you stop and you think about what Donald Trump is saying. But let me assure you, the Americans are the ones who have botched this beyond measure. And that is because of the incompetence in the Trump administration. And I say this not because I'm for or against Donald Trump. All you would have to do, and you know me making these kinds of suggestions, is put together a string of Donald Trump's comments about the Strait of Hormuz. All you have to do is put those over the last 2 weeks together to see the incompetence and the unbelievable misjudgments dealing with this crisis. And that comes purely from the White House itself and the people in the White House who have been driving this policy.
CC Ryder wants to ask you, is Bibi a criminal? Bibi is going to war to avoid criminal trial, period, she says. Is Netanyahu, John, is Bibi corrupt? CC Ryder says. Mark, please ask him this simple question. What do you think?
Well, the answer is that, of course, Benjamin Netanyahu, when he leaves the office of prime minister, is going to be hauled before the Israeli judicial system. And the odds are that he will be found guilty of corruption. As
that means he's corrupt.
Sarah.
Okay.
And let me point out that the Israelis are very tough, unlike America, where Donald Trump ought to be in court and be accused of these things. Israel has put a former president in jail, and a former prime minister, Ehud Olmert, also went to jail. The Israelis have a relatively fair system in terms of punishing leaders who abuse their power. We, in contrast, do not seem to have that same sense of justice. And I could enumerate for you the corruption in the Trump administration that is beyond anything that has ever been conceived of in American politics.
I want to pivot now to the weaponization of the Justice Department here. You've just kind of referenced justice here in this country and what comes out of the Justice Department. The Justice Department has become an arm of revenge for this president. Also, I might say they've become complicit with this president in his desire to milk the American taxpayer for billions of dollars. As you know, he went after the taxpayer money for $230 million for the wrongful, what he considered legal actions taken against him when he wasn't president. Now he wants $10 billion for the release of his taxes. And again, I mentioned the Justice Department because all that has to happen is these requests go through the Justice Department and his toadies at the Justice Department sign off on it. Then he, as president, signs off on it. He gets $10 billion of our money, taxpayer money.
And look at the Board of Peace, the so-called Board of Peace. $1.25 billion. No congressional authorization, no oversight. When I tell you that I believe this administration is the most corrupt administration in American history, it is. Well, there's no question about it. We have never.
So the Justice Department is charging Southern Poverty Law Center with fraud over investigations into extremist groups. This is, again, according to Todd Blanche. Play Blanche cut 16 for Brother Rothman, please.
I'll explain it.
Today, a few minutes ago, in the Middle District of Alabama, a grand jury returned an 11-count indictment charging the Southern Poverty Law Center with 6 counts of wire fraud, 4 counts of bank fraud, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit money laundering. Between 2014 and 2023, SPLC paid at least $3 million to 8 individuals at least. These individuals were affiliated with the Ku Klux Klan, United Klans of America, National Socialist Movement, Aryan Nations Affiliated Sadistic Souls Motorcycle Club, the Nationalist Socialist Party of America, Nazis, and the American Front. According to the charges in the indictment, the SPLC is a nonprofit entity that purports to fight white supremacy and racial hatred by reporting on extremist groups and conducting research to inform law enforcement groups with the goal of dismantling these groups. As the indictment describes, the SPLC was not dismantling these groups. It was instead manufacturing the extremism it purports to oppose by paying sources to stoke racial hatred.
So what this is, and you can put this into context, John, I'm really glad you're here today on this issue, is an accusation that they were paying off insiders, in effect, and in so doing, they were fomenting unrest and hatred as opposed to getting information on unrest and hatred. The reason this is so insane, and then I'll let you speak, is the Southern Poverty Law Center has such a rich history of doing such laudable work.
And let me tell you, the United States government pays informers and has for years. What they're accusing the Southern Poverty Law Center of doing is something that the government has done. It doesn't justify it, but it means How do you think we get information? You pay people for intelligence. We do it all over the world. How do you think we have foreign intelligence that works? We pay millions and millions of dollars for information. What this is an assault on the Southern Poverty Law Center because of their opposition to Donald Trump and Donald Trump's administration and his policies. This is the greatest hypocrisy that I've ever witnessed in recent days dealing with this administration. And may I say, as a proud supporter of the Southern Poverty Law Center, what the work they've done over the years, as you have indicated, is absolutely phenomenal. This is a misuse of the power of the Justice Department, going after Donald Trump's enemies, pure and simple.
And finally, I want to ask you about this Texas ruling. Texas can require public schools to display 10 commandments in classrooms. This is according to an appeals court. The ACLU is saying the decision tramples those rights of families to choose how, when, and if to provide their children with religious instruction. But this is the ruling out of Dallas, Texas, that Texas schools can require the 10 commandments to be displayed in those classrooms. And this is, again, many conservatives want to incorporate more religion, as you know, into the classroom and into the schooling of young Americans. And this would seem to be a win for them.
I must tell you, I am not surprised, but I'm appalled. The idea of the separationist faith in this country, and I've spoken about this over many, many years. I've contributed articles to books about this subject. This is a complete violation of the idea of separation of church and state. And I would point to Thomas Jefferson, who established the principle of the wall of separation. And this kind of situation is not unusual. Let me remind you of Judge Roy Moore in Alabama, who nearly achieved the governorship of Alabama on this issue, where he insisted that the 10 commandments be displayed. And of course, it was all struck down. One can only hope, and I say this advisedly, that when this gets to the United States Supreme Court, the Supreme Court will follow precedent. And let me quickly, while you're doing all of this, and it's so important, and I know we have such limited time, there is now pressure on Sam Alito and Clarence Thomas to leave the Supreme Court before the elections, certainly before January, so that a conservative majority can be maintained on the court. This is court packing at its very worst. We have seen examples of this before during the Trump years. And so all I can tell you is Alito and Thomas are a block of two, and they are older, and they probably will not survive many more years. The question is, will they be forced into retirement before the election? And you have heard the Senate majority leader say that if the vacancies occur, the Senate Republican majority until January are prepared to act immediately to fill those vacancies.
Yeah, the game is on for sure at the Supreme Court level. Yeah. By the way, before I lose you, there is one galling thing.
You'll never lose me, Mark.
Thank you, John. One galling thing that happened. When we were in Afghanistan, we made a lot of deals to protect and actually rehome here in this country many of the translators and many of those who helped us in support roles in Afghanistan. So they did come here, the resettlement program for Afghans who helped the American war effort. And Donald Trump immediately halted that resettlement program for those Afghans who, again, helped the American war effort. And now Trump is in talks to send as many as 1,100 of them to the Democratic Republic of Congo. This is an extraordinary development in my judgment. Now, what they're going to do is they're going to, it seems, give them a choice. You can go back to an Afghanistan that is run by these Talibanese fighters and where you'll, for having cooperated with the Americans, lose your life or worse.
Yes.
Or you can go to the Democratic Republic of Congo, I should say. And by the way, these are interpreters, as I say, special ops people and their family members. There are more than 400 kids who are among all of these people. They've been living in Qatar for over a year. They were taken there after being evacuated by the Americans. And there is no question that if they were to go back to Afghanistan, as you say, they would be killed. Speak to this. To me, it's loathsome.
It is not only loathsome, it should be ruled unconstitutional. There will certainly be appeals to the courts. What Donald Trump is doing, may I be clear in these closing moments, the abuses of power by this administration are absolutely beyond the realm of comprehension. They need to be opposed, and we're going to be talking next week, I have a feeling, about the question of the Supreme Court ruling on citizenship, birthright citizenship. That decision is coming down. There are so many areas here, and I just can't close this without saying to you, the corruption of the Trump administration and its opposition to the fundamental ideals of America are so profound, so great, and one can only hope that the American people, and I'm expressing a partisan political opinion here, that the American people will rise up in November and repudiate this, and that in the next presidential election in 2028, Trump will be repudiated overwhelmingly. Unbelievable, shocking, horrific, and thank you, Mark, for raising that issue. It is so important. And may
Indeed.
I conclude, everyone subscribe, support the Mark Thompson program. I'm only here once a week, but Mark and the team are here 5 days a week, and they do an exceptional job and deserve our support so they can stay viable and make enough money.
Wow, I didn't know John was going to be so effusive in his praise. I would have allowed more time for him. You know, I mean,
I'm sure you would.
They are kissing my ass.
All right. John, love you. You can find John on his podcast, Around the Political World with John Rothman. It's a daily offering, and I recommend it. And he's also on the Voice of San Francisco, thevoicesf.org.
5 days a week. 5 days a week.
5 days a week, baby. You got it. Talk to you soon, John Rothman. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.